Hey everyone, it's Brad and Josh here, and we welcome you to We'll Bring the Popcorn, the ultimate film and TV podcast.
On today's episode, we're going to be reviewing the new music biopic, Springsteen, Deliver Me From Nowhere.
An adult-focused animated crossover series bringing together G.I. Joe and Transformers, which is going to be based off of Robert Kirkman's Energon Universe comic series, is in the works and is said to be TVMA like Invincible. So, I mean, if you've watched Invincible, you know how far out there they can go with the violence and language and everything else. And I haven't read this series, so it's really interesting to see a TVMA being attached to something like Transformers, because you're going to get Optimus Prime cursing, or you're going to get them killing humans, or I have feelings got to be maybe more the G.I. Joe of going maybe a little farther out there and stuff. But it's going to be really interesting what it means for Transformers and G.I. Joe to be TVMA.
Yeah, it feels like a weird crossover, right? But we've had it teased before. It was teased at the end of Transformers Rise of the Beast. If you watch that film, you see where they were kind of teasing this Hasbro universe that's interconnected. And it's going to be interesting to see when they pair those two together in the animated run like you're talking about, because you don't think TVMA when you think of either one of these properties. They've always been geared towards, young kids, specifically boys. But, we both had Transformers and G.I. Joes growing up. Like, we knew what the deal was with that, but to see it take like a more adult approach to a series is an interesting take, because like you said, what is going to be TVMA about it? It's going to be probably very violent. I can imagine it's got a little bit of vulgarity in there too, but if you've seen how us talk about Invincible before, we love the show. Like, I'm a big fan of the show, even though it's like super dark and violent and over the top, but I'm interested to see how they pair these two together and make it like a darker, more adult-centered type show, and just to see what kind of stories they could tell. Like I haven't read these stories either, but I'm interested to see what they pull from and what they do with it.
Yeah, because you just don't want them to throw in sex and violence or coarse language unnecessarily, of having characters that you've grown up with, especially on the Transformer side, doing something just really out of character, especially if you're doing it with Optimus Prime or something. Right. And so yeah, it's really going to be curious how they walk the line of what's well to work within these two universes and not just try to make it Invincible but with Transformers and G.I. Joe, because then you're probably taking it a little too far.
You could be, but we'll see what the market is for that, because I just don't know what they're going to do with it. Like I said, I'm not familiar with the stories. I can't speak on any specific storylines, obviously, but that's one of those stories where you're just like, what are they doing? What's the intent? What's the whole point of it? It's something we definitely need to dig into before we can really talk about it more, but I want to see like what all is going to be involved in it, because it really like piqued our curiosity when you saw they're making an adult version of this thing that, everybody is grown up loving, and it's an interesting take.
Yeah, it's because it's one thing to say, it's in kind of more adult-centered, and we kind of saw that with X-Men 97, that it went a little more adult, but it didn't go that far out there with stuff. But then you go one step forward with this one and say it's going to be TVMA, and like TVMA goes a little intense. So yeah, you just hope it's not going too far. I may look into some of the storylines and see exactly what they've done in the comic realm, but we know Robert Kirkman is not one who shies away from with The Walking Dead and with Invincible and everything else, that he's not scared to do some outlandish things with it. But we don't have a release date for it yet. We don't know exactly when they're planning to put this out. It was just announced, but we know Invincible, once we got the first season, it took a few years before we started getting the rest, but they kind of sped that up afterwards. But we'll see when we finally get it. It could be something that's in that very loaded 2027.
Yeah, it's definitely something to keep an eye on for sure. I want to pivot us to another story now. We keep talking about all these companies trying to merge and all these new streaming options and everything for everybody, but it appears that Warner Brothers has formally announced that they are opening up bidding to purchase the company. Now, you've got all of your classic, entities involved with potentially purchasing it. You've got Apple, you've got Amazon, you got Netflix, you got Comcast. Like, all these companies are in the running to buy it, but it feels like a lot of these companies don't want to buy it as a whole. They're only interested in maybe like film and TV rights, but not necessarily streaming services or anything like that. They're looking to combine it. It leaves a lot of things up in the air as far as what the future of Warner Brothers and the properties that we know exist there that are actively have projects being worked on, and what the future is for all of it.
Yeah, they don't seem to want the network. So you've got TBS, TNT, Discovery, HBO. You have all those networks that what happened to them if they kind of do a chop up sale and get rid of the properties that make HBO what it is? I mean, what if they sell, sell somebody HBO, but someone else gets Game of Thrones? And all, that comes with it. And it also brings in a big question with DC. You have James Gunn, who just took over a few years ago to kind of bring this new DCU up. Could they sell DC off to another company who say, you know what, we want to go in a different direction with DC? Like he just started, and we've got 3 properties out so far from it. That you had Peacemaker season 2, you had Superman, you had Creature Commandos. They're just getting started with the story they're trying to tell, but if it's sold off, there's no guarantee that James Gunn gets to continue what he's trying to do.
Yeah, and that's not even diving into things like sports rights and other things like that Warner Brother currently holds. Like they have, NHL coverage. They have other sports that they cover. You have, a wrestling company, All Elite Wrestling, that Warner Brothers has the TV rights for that you don't know are going to be included in this. You also have like your Game of Thrones properties. You have like all sorts of stuff that Warner Brothers has the rights for, and like, is that going to be piecemealed out? Is it going to be sold off individually? Like, could you see, like you said, could we see Harry Potter on Netflix, the TV series? Like, not to say that the movies haven't been on Netflix before, because they have in the past, because those, like, all those types of properties used to jump ship like crazy to one streaming service to the next before Warner Brothers finally pulled it under their umbrella. But just imagine like things like that shifting away from what you expect them to be on, and now they're on a different service, and it's becoming too much to keep up with. Like you have, a very volatile situation here with Warner Brothers that has gotten to the point where it's been almost bought by Paramount and Skydance, who just recently merged, and they were involved in potentially buying Warner Brothers here, but it's been balked at 3 different times. It's been blocked, and now that we hear word that the Writers Guild is looking to block it as well, like getting really involved with it too. It's a hot mess.
Yeah, it's hard to see because we saw it with Disney when they took over Fox. There's a lot of properties that they took over, and we've seen the output of like 20th Century being reduced a lot more, and that's what they're saying. Like these big mergers between these large companies, as someone like Paramount, who's owned by a billionaire family now, and Warner Brothers, would cause loss of jobs for writers, for actors, for, series being reduced, networks being reduced. So they said it would be devastating to the industry if 2 huge companies merged again like this. Because if we're getting down to like all the studios being owned by just a few people, because I mean, you got Amazon in the business. If they buy it, you just see how much stuff that they're going to have, and you're going to be down. Is it going to be Amazon and Disney owning like every single studio? So it's kind of a crazy situation where a lot of people who work within the industry are just wondering what's going to happen and what's going on, because you can look at it from the top. It just looks like Zazoff trying to get a big payday by selling it off, and it does kind of sound like they may want to piece it out. Like Amazon already has an agreement to do their Lord of the Rings show. Do they take fully over Lord of the Rings, and you just have all their properties now being shifted across a bunch of different networks? Like we talked about, and I think we talked about on our last episode, just how there are too many streaming services now that are all getting up to like $30 a piece. And in one way, okay, if there's one less streaming service, that's okay. But then you got to look at all the jobs that are lost, and you got to look at, well, that's not going to help reduce the price, because they're going to say, well, now you're getting even more content, so now we're going to charge $50 or $60 for our service.
Yeah, but it's turning into a hot mess. You don't want to see people lose their jobs, but like you said, if these entities start rolling up under each other and there's only a few, that's limited opportunities for people who work in the creative industry. And that's not even just talking about like actors and actresses. You're talking about production companies and production crews, and people that pour their heart and souls into making these like shows and movies and things. There's less opportunities for work in an already tough industry to be a part in. You're talking less jobs, less opportunities. It's a hot mess, and you don't want to see it go that way. But man, we keep saying it, but it's going to be really interesting to see what this looks like in a couple years when some of these things start happening and moving. And just, it's been amazing just in the last couple years how different things are from like a content standpoint, and it's just going to get tougher. And we'll see where the ball drops on a lot of these properties, and what it means for not only the people that work in the industry, but us as consumers who are already struggling with keeping one streaming service over another. But if they all become too more expensive, what's going to start happening now? Like, are we going back to cable again? Or the cable companies just sitting there like evilly, like, just looking at us like we knew you'd be back? Like it's almost feeling like it needs to be that way again. And it's crazy that it's gotten to that point, but it's looking like a very real possibility.
Yes, Warner and Discovery already did a merger just a couple years ago. And as you mentioned, Skydance and Paramount, they did their merger. And so there's been a ton of movement and mergers. I mentioned Disney and Fox. Like there's been a whole lot of consolidation and moving stuff because they're spending a lot of money, and the theatrical runs of a lot of films just are not getting them the box office that they're expecting or wanting. But you also got to think they're definitely overspending on many films. We can go back to Joker Folie à Deux that cost $500-600 million to make, and it didn't make even close to that back. And we still wonder, like, why did that film have such a huge production? And there's, of course, a lot of people in the industry, why are fans and other people worrying about what it cost? Because it's costing films not to be able to come out, and we're not getting stories to continue, and it's causing a lot of issues with the studios as well to be able to continue on. And I don't want to see all these properties and studios owned by only the rich. Like we're getting down to, or is it going to be Apple, who has an overabundance of cash flow, and Amazon, who's a 2-point-something trillion dollar company, owning everything?
Right. It's a hot mess. We'll see what it looks like going forward. But man, it's one to really keep an eye on, because Warner Brothers has a lot of really popular properties under their umbrella, and it's going to be really interesting to see how it all scatters, like we think it might, and it very well could. And it's going to be interesting to see where everything lands and where it falls out.
And kind of keeping us somewhat in the same area, talking about Amazon here, we reported back on that they had got the rights to James Bond and that they're working on a new film. You got Denis, who is doing, after he's done with Dune, is going to be moving into James Bond and everything. But the financial report of the company that did own the James Bond right came out, and it looked like Amazon, at least just initially, only paid $20 million for the rights of James Bond. Like, we got to remember, this is a series of films that began in 1962. Yeah. They've grossed over $8 billion, or around $8 billion. Daniel Craig's alone made $4 billion in his 5-film run, and you only purchase it for $20 million. Like, there could be stock options, there could be residuals and percentages that they get off of what the new James Bond and stuff, but just to see that a $1 trillion company paid only $20 million. So like Daniel Craig reportedly made $25 million for his last appearance as Bond. So you might have bought James Bond for less than it cost for James Bond.
It's a crazy stat that, like you said, we don't know all the financial particulars necessarily. This is the only tangible bit of financial news to come out of this. I can't imagine a world where they would sell the rights for James Bond for just $20 million. That makes absolutely no sense. There's got to be more involved to it than this. I'm extremely skeptical of that being the final price tag. Maybe this is for a creative controlling interest in it that comes with insert number here for insert, thing that is tied to it too. And it's zero chance that it's just $20 million for James Bond. That property is worth way more money than that. Like you said, it is one of the very few notable bankable film franchises out there that every time a Bond film comes out, it makes a ton of money. They just do. That's why they keep making them. That's why it's been a franchise for 53 years at this point. Like 63 years, actually. Like my math was a little fuzzy there, but it's been around forever, and it's just one of those, like, there's no way it was only worth $20 million. I'm throwing my BS flag in the air for that one, because, like you said, this is the only bit of financial news that we have, like, concrete evidence of, and I was like, that's just got to be the tip of the iceberg. There's no way it's just that.
Yeah, because originally it was reported it was about $1 billion deal, right. But the only financial thing that's come out was this $20 million payment, and it's like, is that a down payment? Are they putting James Bond on layaway? And as a $1 trillion company, like,
get him out of Christmas.
We also don't know if it's one of those situations like Marvel and Sony has, where Sony has the rights to Spider-Man to do films and stuff with, but they have to kind of do it every so many years or the rights revert back. So there could be some sort of that deal in there. So if like Amazon drags their feet on getting the James Bond films out, that it can go back to them. But yeah, it's just so weird that's the only thing we get, because if that $8 billion doesn't sound a crazy high amount to you, you got to look at in the big picture that there are only 3 other properties as a whole that have made more money in the box office. Yeah. And that's the MCU, that's Harry Potter, and that's Star Wars. So James Bond is a 4th highest grossing series of all time. Yeah. That's a gigantic series. That's a huge series. And yeah, I don't believe it was just 20 million, but that's the only thing we can see. And that just boggled my mind. Like, how could you give up something that just made $4 billion across 5 films for $20 million?
Not a chance. That's the final number. That's one that I'm waiting to see more info come out on that, because there's just absolutely no way. But it's a crazy statement that it's just 20 million that we've only seen so far. And obviously we're not privy to all of the financial contract situations. They're not publicly disclosing a bunch of stuff, but that's the first official financially disclosed, any type of money exchange for this property so far. And it was a very interesting number to look at for sure, but we'll keep an eye on that just to see what other details we can get for it are.
Yeah, they also released official confirmation that Denis Villeneuve will not have, and again, I butcher names, so sorry, Denis. He won't have final cut of his James Bond film. So he's going to be picking the next James Bond when he finishes Dune and everything going into it. But that's big, because we've heard of so many films, especially within the MCU, DCU, directors complaining that they didn't have final cut of their film, and what was released was not what they wanted. Studios stepped in and made them record things that either weren't in the script or they wanted to see differently, and they released a cut that was nowhere near. So that's where you get a lot of the director's cuts and everything else coming from, is when the studio has control of the final cut. The directors can fight and try to get a director's cut out that could be a completely different film. So somebody like Denis and what he's done with Dune and Blade Runner and everything else, not having full control over what he's doing with James Bond just seems wild to me.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see the final product of that for sure, because not giving a brilliant director like that final cut, and him agreeing to that is kind of surprising too. You kind of wonder could that have been the $20 million down payment that we could be talking about there? Could have been for him to just
backing up the Brinks truck to his door. You don't have final cut? Bring in another one.
Yeah, we'll see what happens out of that. But I want to pivot this into our final news story this week. A director that you and I both really enjoy, Ty West. We got to see him at one of the recent conventions that we got to cover too. Got to hear him talk about some of his love for horror. He's going to be directing an adaptation of A Christmas Carol. Now, A Christmas Carol is a property that's been done several times over at this point, but it's going to be interesting to see a take on it from a director like Ty West, who has a very unique, almost guerrilla style way of filming his horror movies. Like if you've seen X or Pearl or Maxine, like those types of films and how brilliant he is. But he's got a very interesting lead to play Ebenezer Scrooge here in this film.
You got Johnny Depp stepping in to be Ebenezer Scrooge. This is actually his first major studio role since 2018, when he was let go from Fantastic Beasts because of everything going on in his personal life. And as we try to stay out of that stuff, think of him and everything else as you will. But yeah, it's his first role since 2018. It looks like it's going to come out probably around Christmas next year. You would think November, December 2026. So it's going to have to go into production here soon. But it's really interesting to see Ty West, who we've mainly known from horror. We don't really know what his take is going to be like yet. They call it like a supernatural ghost story, which it is. But you don't know if that means if he's going to take it on the horror route, if he's going to go suspense thriller, or if it's going to be, because like you said, it's been done hundreds and hundreds of times. We talked about it before we started recording. A lot of our personal favorites of Mickey's Christmas Carol and A Muppet's Christmas Carol are the two that stand out, the family-friendly versions. But you've had so many different live action, animated plays, even ones like Scrooge, and Ryan Reynolds did one that was very much a modern take on it. Like, you've had it done straight up and in different adaptations, but it's also weird because we have yet another Christmas Carol that was already announced that'll probably be out in 2027.
Yeah, and it also involves a very popular horror director. You've got Robert Eggers is also going to be developing his own take on it now. He's going to be tied up with, Werewolf that's coming out next year, so this is potentially a 2027 Christmas release, but his Scrooge is another one that could potentially be awesome as well. He's tied Willem Dafoe to play Ebenezer Scrooge in his version of it, so, Robert Eggers loves working with Willem Dafoe, as does several other directors as love him. Willem Dafoe is absolutely phenomenal as an actor, but his take on Scrooge could be interesting too. You got two very prominent modern horror directors are taking on this classic Christmas story, and it's going to be interesting to see how they put their own spins on it. If you know Robert Eggers, it's probably going to be some kind of period piece, obviously. We don't know if that's also going to be the case with Ty West, who also kind of likes to shoot things in a specific time period for his types of stories, especially when you've seen, like we said, X, Pearl, and Maxine are all set in very distinct time periods as well. Like, this is going to be interesting to see how they both take it and interpret it and make it their own, because, like you said, it feels like it's almost been done to death at this point, but you have two very prominent, popular horror directors getting their hands on it too. It's going to be fun. I'm excited to see it. It's good to see Johnny Depp back in acting roles a little bit again. Feel what you feel about his personal life, but this is his opportunity to kind of really step back into the spotlight and see what he can do if he can carry a film like this. And I'm excited to see what kind of magic they can come up with together.
Yeah, even though, I'm interested to see Ty West's take on it, especially with what he did with the X trilogy, and if it's going to be more horror and seeing Johnny Depp as Ebenezer. I got to be honest, I'm still more looking forward to Robert Eggers because
he's phenomenal.
He is a great director who, when he does a period piece, he is so detail-oriented about how it looks and how they speak and how they do. And just Willem Dafoe plus Ebenezer Scrooge, that just sounds like a perfect match because he can do the grouchy, kind of evil kind of guy, but he can give us all that emotion range. And Johnny Depp is a great actor. He can do it, but when I first heard it, Willy Wonka popped in my mind for that, while I got more excited about Willem Dafoe and, just his look and his feel and how he can do kind of more grouchy evil. It sounds like it's a role that's much more fit for Willem than it is for Johnny, but I'm looking forward to checking out both of them, but I will say Robert Eggers is the one I'm still more looking forward to.
Yeah, I can hear Willem Dafoe now, I am Ebenezer Scrooge, just doing it in his.
And then he throws a pumpkin bomb.
only his way. Save us, Tobey Maguire. Save us from Ebenezer Scrooge. But no, Robert Eggers he's just so good, man. Not to say Ty West isn't, because I like Ty West films as well, but Robert Eggers really diving into a Christmas Carol could be really cool. I mean, obviously we're big fans of Nosferatu. Go back and check out our review in our archives for that. But excited to see him really dive in and get his hands on it too. That's going to be really cool. I'd love to see an all black and white version of it if he wanted to. Mm-hmm. Just go for it, man. Just do it. But we'll be interested to see what it looks like when it comes out.
Give us a gothic horror ghost tale in black and white with Willem Dafoe's Ebenezer. That would be fantastic.
I'm all for it.
We are now partnered with Dubby Energy. Dubby is a clean energy drink to give you focus with no crash or jitters like other energy drinks.
Dubby contains vitamins, amino acids, and 150 milligrams of caffeine. It also features 0 calories, no sugar, no fillers, and no artificial dyes.
From Dragonade and S'mores to Push and Punch and Galaxy Grenade, Dubby has a wide range of flavors for you to choose from.
Use code WBTP to save 10% off your Dubby Energy orders and look for a direct link in the audio and video descriptions.
So our movie review of the week is Springsteen, Deliver Me From Nowhere. So this is a very specific time period in Bruce Springsteen's life, set back in the early 80s, around 81, 82, when he was writing his, I wouldn't say controversial, but his most intriguing, I guess, type of album, because instead of doing a rock album, he was putting out this folk rock album that was acoustic, and it was done with echo and recorded in his bedroom in a New Jersey house that he was renting. So it was definitely an interesting time in his life, because it also deals heavily with depression and suicidal thoughts and just mental illness and problems with that. And I got to right away give it up to Jeremy Allen White. I think he was really fantastic. And there's some who will debate if he looked like Bruce Springsteen enough. He's probably the closest living actor who could look anywhere close to him. You might have been able to do some prosthetics, but I don't think it was going to change his look enough. It might have taken him away from looking like Bruce, but I think he did a really fantastic job in this. He did sing. He learned to play the guitar and sing and went through a lot of training for it. I would say like Jeremy Strong as his manager was really solid in the movie as well. But I'll be honest, I'm still a little bit mixed on how I felt about this film.
Yeah, I agree. It's a very niche portion of his life, but you could argue that it makes for the most probable intriguing film that you could make about his life. Let's not mix words here. Bruce Springsteen is an iconic musician, songwriter, performer. The man still to this day is selling out football stadiums and arena tours and doing big tours every time he goes out, and it's just backed by a phenomenal E Street Band as well. Like he's an incredible musician, but this is probably the most film worthy, I would say, time of his life. It's based on an autobiography that was written about him as well. You know, it goes through this real dark time in his life where he's really breaking out and becoming a mega star in music. He's got top 10 hits. You've got Born to Run is like his big single that's really broken him out as a mainstream artist. Really cool little tidbit there to see the like first performance that we get from him is the end of his River tour that stopped here in Cincinnati, Ohio. Like that was a really cool thing to see for that as well. But it kind of picks up where he leaves from that tour to get ready to basically write the album that the record label was wanting him to put out, which is Born in the USA, right? The big mega star single that winds up being like one of the biggest hits of his career, if not the absolute biggest hit that he ever had. But he finds himself in this really dark place where he's capable of writing the song, but he's at a point in his life where he's deep into depression. He's got a little bit of imposter syndrome, which a lot of famous musicians, you know, have, that feel like, you know, they don't really deserve the fame and things that they're getting. And like he's dealing with a lot of things like, you know, having an alcoholic father as a kid and just, you know, coming from a really dark place, and him trying to balance fame, deal with his demons, and kind of go through this whole thing where it's something that even to this day, he still kind of struggles with depression, but this is probably the lowest he gets in his life. And just really the creativity that comes out of that winds up being these demo tracks that he winds up putting together to put out the album that became known as Nebraska. That's got a couple popular songs on the record, but it was really cool. I want to say, as like a fellow musician and artist, I don't want to go too far on a rant with this, but it's really cool to see these guys kind of make the music that speaks to them in the moment and not really cave into the pressure of the record labels. Like, it's a pretty bossy move, kind of pun somewhat intended, to say, like, I know you want me to put out this album that's gonna we know this record's good. And that's kind of the way they approach like Born in the USA here. It's like, we know this song's a banger, we know it's a hit, everybody agrees it's a hit, but this music that I'm trying to make now speaks to me with where my life is now, and this makes sense to me, and this is this story that I'm trying to tell where I'm just facing these personal demons and just going through this really tough time in my life where I need help, but this is the way I'm getting my frustration and depression and just having this mental breakdown that he's going through here. And it just manifests itself in this incredible emotional folk album that he puts together in a really cool, like, rock star kind of way of just like, I know you want me to make this real pretty and polished, but I want this to sound dark and gritty and brooding, and this tone is the tone I want to accurately represent my artistic vision for what I have for this. He's like, I don't even care if you promote it. I just want to put it out. I just want to put the record out. It doesn't have to sell well. Obviously, the record labels are going to be like, well, that doesn't work for us. We want to make money off of it. But, you know, it was a pretty bossy moment for him. And it was really cool to, like, show that and just kind of have him as a character and as an artist in the film kind of really stand by his work and was like, no, this is really important to me. I'm going to put my foot down here.
Yeah, like I've said, I was never really a huge fan of Bruce Springsteen's. I can recognize the hits that he has, but outside of those hits, it can be very hit or miss with a lot of his songs and stuff, and it's his voice and, you know, the presentation and stuff. But I did get a little more respect for him as an artist because that's the type of stuff I connect to with music. It's the storytellers like Glenn Hansard and all the folk rockers and that who are telling stories and telling, you know, these journeys and stuff through their music, and there's emotion and there's passion behind what they're singing. But I think the movie also lets it down a little bit because you have him going through this, the depression and the mental hardships, and he's writing this album, and it's touching on like the title track of Nebraska was about Charles Starkweather, which was, this killer and everything else. But other tracks are supposed to be about blue collar workers and about childhood memories. And we kind of get the childhood, which I'll give it props. I love the fact that all of the stuff in his childhood was kept in black and white. Yeah. So it gave that great contrast that you knew what was the past and what is currently happening and everything else. But I feel like they didn't dive as much into the meanings and the emotion behind a lot of these songs. I mean, it touched on like 4 of the 10 tracks or so that were on the Nebraska album, plus, Born in the USA was written during the Nebraska time, along with like 7 other songs that, those are the ones they wanted to put out as the album. But as you said, Bruce was like, no, these demos is what I want to release. And it was very risky. You got to think this was early 80s. Yeah. You don't have the internet prominent. Everything's on vinyl or coming out on 8-track, and cassettes are starting to become a big thing at that point. So like radio play is hugely important to artists during that time. And as you said, with Nebraska, he said, I don't want to do a tour. I don't want press. I don't want singles. I just want to put the album out. And the album still was like in the top 10 of albums released, but it was a very, for that time and for an artist who was just starting to break out, very risky for him to do. And like it touches on that. They hit a lot of good points with showing his depression, showing how he was, and Jeremy Allen White was great of seeing that, because a lot of times you can look like he's just brooding and giving kind of the look that he's kind of known for giving, but you can see that there are things he's fighting. If you've ever had depression, nobody with depression, you could see that coming out of him, of where he just doesn't know what to do with himself. And kind of all around this recording of the album, it goes into a relationship with a woman named Faye, and she's got a young girl. And this relationship a lot shows just kind of how emotionally detached he was during that time. Yeah. But I do have a problem with this, because when the movie ended, I was like, oh, I need to see, did Bruce and Faye end up together? Is this what his wife's? Because like I said, I've heard Bruce's songs, but I've never looked up his life and see what's went on. So I'm like, oh, let's see if him and Faye ended up, getting together and all that. And like, Faye doesn't exist. Yeah. It's a little bit of a spoiler here, but Faye is a combination of a bunch of different women that he dated, which part of it could be his wife, Patty, that he did meet. She ended up eventually being asked by Bruce to join the E Street Band later on, and they got married, I think, early 90s. And then there was his autobiography that he put out himself had an unnamed woman with a child that he dated for a short time. They kind of took all these different relationships that he had during that time and made this woman Faye, but it kind of disappointed me to learn that she didn't exist, because I thought the actress who portrayed her did really well. There was a great scene when she basically just goes off on Bruce about, kind of starts his awakening of knowing that, you know what, I have a problem, I have depression, I have a lot of stuff going on, but it wasn't a real woman in the end, and that just kind of disappointed me a little bit. Not going to lie, that I should take what was in the film, but when I looked stuff up afterwards to see just how true to life things were and how much they sensualized and just made and dramatized the story, the main love story in this movie didn't exist.
Yeah, I take umbrage with that too, and when they introduced her, I was expecting it to be Patty. Like, that's expecting it was like Faye. Like, who is Faye? I know a little bit more about like Bruce's life, being a little bit bigger fan of his than you may be necessarily. But she said her name was Faye. I'm like, it's not his wife's name. Like, who is this person supposed to be? And then come to find out, it's like an amalgam of multiple women that he's dated throughout his life, which is a little bit disappointing, because it felt like it was shoehorned in to add some hope, I guess, to the story. I guess just a little bit. Like it felt unnecessary, but necessary at the same time, because like something's got to pull him out of it. What is he hopeful for? What is he using as a means to bring himself out of this depression? But to be fair, that's something he's battled, a demon that he's battled throughout almost all of his life, not just in this time period. It's not like he got on the other side of this and it's been all hunky-dory for the last 35, 40 years. But it felt like a love story was kind of just shoehorned in for the dramatization of the film a little bit, to add like a different layer to it. But the other parts of it that they did when they focused on the musical part of it were done well. I will give it, like you said, Jeremy Strong playing his manager, kind of slash like confidant slash best friend, even like, you know, was really well done. It's a strong performance by Jeremy Strong.
Yeah, there was a great moment that I wanted to butt in where he's on the phone with Bruce towards the end, and you don't really hear it mentioned about suicidal thoughts or anything else, but you hear Jeremy just say, "Just hold on for me, man. Just give me a little bit. Just hold on." And that was like, ooh, that's a gut punch, because you're talking about the 80s. Yeah. You know, most men in the 50s, 60s, 70s, even going into the 80s, were kind of taught you've got to be macho. You've got to hold all your emotions in. Yeah. You have to be this certain way, and you don't talk about your emotions. So you have two guys who are, you know, Bruce was born in the 40s. You get two guys just kind of, you get that guy kind of talk like, just hold on, man. You're not saying it, but it's kind of how kind of guys would at that point. They're just saying like, hey, you just got to hold on for me. Just give me some more time.
Yeah, it's powerful. It's recognizing that in your friends and just being able to like let them know like, hey, it's going to be okay, man. I'm here for you if you need to. Just kind of hang in there, put in the work, and you know, you'll get on the other side of it. And it was a really powerful moment in the film. I agree with that with you. And just their dynamic was awesome. To kind of point back towards the musical part of it a little bit, it made me laugh just seeing the portrayal of his need to get the sound exactly the way he wanted it to be put out, because he was just like, why can't we just release these cassettes? We're like, Bruce, we gotta transfer it to gotta transfer it to the vinyls. You gotta put out the records, like they gotta be on the records. And just them trying everything they could to get this exact sound that he wanted. And I've worked with people like that who are so meticulous in the way things have to sound, down to like things that most normal people wouldn't think about. And he's just that anal about it, that, you know, that OCD about the exact sound and tone and feeling, because he's like, it's almost there, but it doesn't have the same feel. Like, I know artists like that, and it was a really fun, kind of light moment where it's just like, you could see how serious he is, but it's still kind of like, if you don't understand the way artists and creatives' minds work sometimes, like you get hyper fixated on wanting something very, very specific, and it's not if it's not the exact thing you're wanting, it's a problem. And it was just really, for me, humorous to see that in the film, where it's just like you're having to pull out all the stops of old school transfer technique, because you got to figure this is the 80s. You don't have all this digital stuff that you could do to kind of polish and make things sound clean here. You're talking very old school, reel to reel, like transfer, and like the way they made records back then it's just fascinating for me as a musician. But to just kind of see them lean into that, we're just like, we got the best studio in the world, we can't make this record sound exactly like the way Bruce wants. It was funny for me, but it was a really cool musical moment in the film for me. It was just, I felt that as an artist myself, and it was really fun to see in the film.
Yeah, there's another one that you'll probably agree with here on too, because I think there's a point where you got Paul Walter Hauser, who plays Mike. He's basically the guy who's helping Bruce record this album in his bedroom the whole time, and he's the one sitting there recording it on it, because these cassettes held like 4 songs each time. But Bruce brings in this machine that causes echo on everything, and it's a moment where he says, like, we're going to run everything through this, and he's like, yeah, it's going to put echo on everything and all of it. You sure? And you can see the look in his face, like as a producer and someone who works in music, like, this isn't a good idea. Not something you should be doing. But he's like, you're the artist, and do what you want to do. So it's another one of those moments, like, all right, I don't really agree with what you're doing here, but
we're gonna roll.
Here you go. We're gonna roll with it.
Yeah, it was fun. It was cool to see some of those technical aspects of recording that don't always get presented in film, just to kind of see it, because that's a very real thing, trying to dial in a specific tone or a specific sound that you're wanting your song to sound like as a representation of your artistic expression. And it was really cool to see them kind of show a little love to that part of the process too, because that's a very real thing when you're going and making songs, when you're dealing with recording. Like, you have what you want, but you also have experienced people that may be helping you with your recording and your tracking and everything, and it's like the people that are in charge of like mixing and mastering your sound to kind of make it sound like the way it needs to sound. And there's always not always, but there's cases where it's back and forth where they'll push back on you even as an artist a little bit. We're just like, I can't get it to do this. If you thought about doing it like this, and some of that back and forth, and Bruce just wasn't having any of it. He was like, I'm
going to sound just like this.
Yeah, and a little bit of love to a little bit of love to Mark Maron, who plays like the main sound engineer in that studio as well, where he was just like, you could see he played the frustration on his face. So like dealing with this bullheaded, strong-armed artist that really wants this exact thing, and he's just at a complete loss where he's just like, I love you, Bruce. We'll make it happen, but my God, you're killing me here. Like I can't.
The glances between like the managers and the people making the music, the technicians and stuff, is just like. You can read their body language. Like, is he serious? Like, we can't do this stuff. And it's like, you got to do.
Got to do it. It was just a really fun part of recording that most people don't get to see. And it was cool to be out there.
I did want to touch on a couple more elements that felt a little just off to me in the film.
Sure.
And the first one was, like, I did enjoy what they showed through his childhood because, as we've kind of hinted at, Bruce didn't have the most, I guess, exciting life and their drama and stories as you've seen with other artists who gets biopics and stuff. There's no real big controversial issue or something else that pops up with him. A lot of it stems from his childhood, that his dad was an alcoholic, he was abusive, he was schizophrenic, so you kind of touch on all that stuff, and that potentially that runs in his family, and that's what's causing some of, Bruce's issues and stuff. But a problem I had with those flashbacks is that there's one scene and one scene only where Bruce is in the car with his dad, and then just this blonde little girl pops up. You have no real introduction on who this is or everything is. And if you know his story, he has two sisters.
Yeah.
But only one shows up in one sequence where he stops at this real big farmhouse and lets him run through cornfields, and that's it.
There's no reference again.
Like, there's no references when he's, for the older parts in the 80s or anything else. Like, the other sister is never mentioned. Like, it is never talked about, mentioned, or said that he has two sisters. Yeah. Just that one sequence where this girl just randomly pops up and then she's never seen again.
Or referenced.
I had to look it up to see, like, did they die early? Did something happen? No, they're both alive and they're both going strong. They, I think it was Virginia was the one that was shown in the film, and she went to the premiere and everything else. But it was just weird how they spent so much time on his childhood and referencing the stuff he went through that his sisters were never mentioned. And maybe they just weren't important to that story. But if you're going back to his childhood, they're involved in his growing up. Like, how did the father stuff affect them? Like, there's more that you could have done there to relate, to have his family in it. Like, I know you're telling his story, but his sisters should be part of his story.
You would think, but I guess it just didn't make for enough of an interesting tale, I guess, because no drama with the sisters doesn't make for a good movie. Oh, great, they have a great relationship. You could touch on that a little bit. Like, why didn't you allow him to lean on them for help, too? Were they not involved in his life at that point? We don't know, at least through the way they told this story, right? And you'd have to be a little bit more of a hardcore Springsteen fan to know more about, like, his family dynamics. Obviously, there's a decent relationship with the sister if they're showing up at the premiere of the film, so you got to figure all is okay. Was all not okay then? How isolated was he really? Did he not have any contact with other members of his family? Like, you show that how important dealing with that relationship with his father is in this film, and the mom feels just kind of like a unfortunate throwaway character here, like not necessarily important. Like, he felt very protective of his mother, but he was all about mending this relationship with his father and getting some kind of, like how important his relationship to his dad is to him, portrayed in this movie, obviously, with the issues that his dad had. But yeah, they didn't lean, like, it dealt with some family childhood trauma, but it was just all dad related, not really related to anyone else. And they just kind of chose to hyper focus on it without really discussing too much of the relationship he had with the rest of his family. It was an artistic choice that I didn't really care for either, but like, it's okay to deal with the dad, but show some love to the rest of the family too, even if it's okay. Like, hey, like, they all have to deal with the issues of his dad. It's not just Bruce that, has this issue, but it's a Bruce movie, so it is what it is.
I felt like you just didn't need that sequence if you're not going to dive into anything. You don't mention her name. You don't mention really anything other than running through the fields and actually finally seeing him be a kid more than what he has been through there. But it just felt like, well, why include her at all if that's all you're going to do? But my other nitpick is with the E Street Band. Like, we know famously he has this backing band behind him and stuff. And again, Nebraska was something that was mainly him. They did do the electric recordings, which they just now finally released. They had never released up to this point. They did a special in reissue of Nebraska for the movie, where I think it's like 4 discs, and you actually get the recordings with the, but they didn't record all of them. Like, all the tracks they did on Nebraska, I think they only recorded like 4 to 7 out of the 10 or something electric. But you know, it's a very famous part of his life and his band with the E Street Band, but they're just kind of set pieces. They're just there. Like, you get that opening concert at Riverfront Stadium in Cincinnati, then you have a concert at the end, and then you have a little bit in the studio, but you don't, I can't even remember if any of them had any dialogue. No. If you had anything, they were just kind of there. And it feels like if the E Street Band is that important and huge part of his musical career, that there should have been a little something. Like, even like his nickname, The Boss. Again, we're the movie's heavily focused on the 80s. You don't even go into where his nickname, The Boss, comes from. Like, he's being called it, and it was mainly around, you know, he handled the finances of the band, so they jokingly called him The Boss. But he was also big into board games and was really good at them and winning, so they called him The Boss of that. Could you have not thrown in maybe a sequence, since you've created a fake relationship, of where they're like playing board games with the E Street Band and they're having a good time or something, and they call him The Boss, and you get The Boss, and you get the it just felt weird that the E Street Band was just like set dressing and not really any importance to it. Even like how he treated him felt a little, it actually painted Bruce more in a harsher light, because it didn't feel like he had much care for the band, because like he wanted to throw away everything that they recorded with the band, and everything was written by him and everything was produced by him, and there was like no input on any of the songs or anything that was going on with the E Street Band. It felt strange to me. Maybe that's probably how a lot of it really happened, but with something that's such a big part of his musical journey, to have like really no importance to a biopic you're doing about him just felt odd.
Yeah, it's definitely a choice, but it just feels like the direction they were going, the theme was heavily into him and his solo individual experience with life. Like, all of these other things are kind of ancillary pieces around the narrow focus of what the story actually is, right? So they definitely didn't do a ton of favors to all of the other pieces around him in his life. It was just more like this dark abyss that he found himself in mentally, that just kind of blinded himself to everything else that was important around him. Like, you could see he respected the band, even if they weren't a huge part of the Nebraska recordings or what he wanted for that specific album. But you could see the immediate, like, oh, I know we're going to go in and we're going to knock this. Like, when they were recording Born in the USA and how easy it was for them to put it together, you could tell he had a ton of respect for the band, and it was just like super confident, like, yeah, we're gonna kill this. We're gonna do, like, I know they're gonna do that. Like, it didn't need to serve anything with the story they were trying to tell, so I'm not as nitpicky about that necessarily. Like, I agree. The overall story is, obviously, you think about Bruce Springsteen, but you think of it as Bruce Springsteen featuring the E Street Band. Like, that's a huge part of his career, even though there was a huge gap, if you know anything about him, where they famously broke away from Bruce for like over a decade before they finally got back in together. I think it was like 99 or 98 when they got back together and started, you know, touring and doing music together again. But like, you could tell he had a ton of respect for those guys, where it was just like, the E Street Band wasn't a worry for him at this time, because he knew, like, hey, when we do this, we can make magic together. I'm not worried about that, but I got to deal with this thing that I'm dealing with currently that was more important than anything else he could have been doing at the time. So I get it, but I'm not as nitpicky about that.
Yeah, and at the time, like, they had been together 10 years at that point. So even though this is a darker moment in his life, I just felt like even the film could have given some little bit more love to the E Street Band than
couldn't have leaned on any of them.
Yeah, like he didn't go to. I mean, and that's kind of how guys were at that time too. That he didn't have any confidence to go to any of the members of his band and stuff too. And if they're trying to keep that as real, then I can do that. But it just, like, they were a huge part of who he is as an artist, that it just felt weird that they were kind of excluded from the film. Because even with like Bohemian Rhapsody, you still got a decent piece of the guys in the band around it and got to have some dialogue and talking and other stuff like that. But this was more like, this is 100% Bruce, which I can get. I get that it's a dark depression and everything else, and it's about his emotional state and how he's handling it and his kind of downfall through this album into the state he was. But there was just some things that just felt a little off of what you know, the fake relationship, not as much on the E Street Band and the sisters just not being a part of it. There's a lot that just felt a little strange of how they structured it. Because again, if you're going on this dark depression ride with Bruce as he's going, we also didn't get to dive that deep into the meaning of these songs that he's doing. Like, we got the serial killer type of thing for the Starkweather, Nebraska song, but the other songs we didn't really get to see, okay, what is this part of his life, of his depression and everything else? Because if they were going to go that route, I wanted to see him dive more into the meaning of the songs and what it meant to him and what was bringing up. Because you probably get that the flashbacks to his childhood were supposed to be leaning into those songs a little bit there, but most of it was kind of the same subject matter, going back and forth of his dad having, you know, he had to go in as a boy into a bar and get his father to leave a bar because all he did was drink, and you know, Bruce hitting him in the back with a baseball bat that started changing things a little bit to how it did. And you get that connection, but I feel like I wanted more connection to the songs and the music that he was writing for Nebraska. If it's that personal and emotional of a journey, we didn't get the full emotion of the music through it.
Sure. And that's a very fair criticism in the way that this was portrayed in the movie. Like, I agree wholeheartedly that you wanted more of that emotional connection to why those songs were as important, and they didn't do as crisp of a job of tying it in a way that's a little more palatable. You have to kind of draw your own conclusions in that, which is an artistic choice, I guess. But sometimes it's okay to beat us over the head with it a little bit, just a little bit more. You don't have to go full on beating over the head with it, but you can tie that in, be a little crisper about tying that together in a way that has the same impact, but also making the statement that you want to make with it. So yeah, I would agree that is a valid criticism of how they handled that part of the movie for sure.
Good. I will go back to what I said about Jeremy Allen White, that he was very strong in here. Like, I would almost say because I did go back and I listened to the Nebraska album after this, and I listened to a little bit of Born in the USA and Born to Run and The River, and kind of getting myself of listening to Bruce again. It may be wrong to say, but I think I actually prefer Jeremy Allen White's singing of Bruce Springsteen's songs in here, because I felt almost like, because he's an actor and he knows the emotional weight and what was going into that, so he was able to bring, I feel, more emotion into it than maybe Bruce was not focusing on the emotion. You've got an actor focusing on the emotion of how something should be saying, that I felt the emotion through Jeremy singing with some of these songs in Nebraska. I'm not saying he's better than Bruce Springsteen. I'm just saying I felt like the emotion and the way they presented these songs worked so well with Jeremy Allen's version of it in the film. Like, even you could see the reaction that they released a clip of him singing Born in the USA, and it blew about everybody away. Even Bruce Springsteen said there were some of the recordings here that I couldn't tell the difference between me and Jeremy singing it. So he was close on a lot of the songs. They were off on a little bit, but Bruce is also one, his voice is kind of a little bit, no disrespect, his voice is a little all over the place on some of the songs. Like, it can be much darker and gravelier on some and a little lighter and airier on others and everything else. But I think Jeremy Allen White did a very good job of performing these songs and singing and doing kind of all of his own playing and music, or the harmonica and singing and doing everything. He did a fantastic job with that.
Yeah, so please send all your hate comments to Brad Covey at We'll Bring the No, I'm just kidding. Don't do that. But yeah, I get where you're coming from. I couldn't disagree more as far as, like, I know what you're saying about Jeremy Allen White's versions, but it's hard to top the emotional connection of the people actually performing the songs that live and experience it. But him embodying that and sounding fairly close to Bruce, to the point where even you get the respect of the artists themselves, that's about as huge of a compliment as you can get from the artists themselves, and directly being like, hey, you nailed this. Respect for you for putting in the work and making it sound as close to authentic as you could, where the artists themselves are like, you did a phenomenal job with that. That's the hallmark of talent and actor putting in the work, and definitely give some love to Jeremy Allen White for that, because he did, get the blessing of Bruce himself for this and his portrayal in it. So that's definitely a win for him.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be blasphemous. I just felt like, because as you said, the actor knows the emotion of what he's trying to portray, and he's getting that depression, he's getting everything else. And so you could feel that in Jeremy's performances. I also like, which you don't see a lot in these biopics, there's sequences where after performance, Jeremy could barely speak.
Yeah.
And it was true, like he lost his voice at times singing, but you think that, these artists who, after doing a 3-hour concert, are going to be able to talk and sound perfect and everything afterwards, and you got a much hoarse and, sounding off, and it's very kind of realistic to how a singer could be afterwards. So I appreciated those little details of Jeremy Allen White being able to connect into the emotion of the song and really drive that emotion home on screen. I think that's more what I was trying to get at. Like, he's able, with his face and how he was singing and everything else, was able to really bring the emotion home that you needed for those recordings and the songs. I wanted to see a little bit more of that, but he did a phenomenal job in it. I think there could potentially be some award season stuff for him, more for that darker emotion of showing the depression and performing of the songs, because it's not an overcomplicated, deep story for him to really, really act and really get into it. But I think there was enough with his singing and his portrayal of depression and suicide and everything else, suicidal thoughts and stuff in there, that could warrant him to get something. I don't know if so much as the film overall, but I think he was really the standout, along with just a few other handful actors, and everyone did their parts really well, but Jeremy really was a standout.
Yeah, he's doing the heavy lifting throughout the bulk of the film, right? And if anyone I think is going to get awards consideration from it, it would be him for his portrayal. We'll see. This is such a stacked year with good performances that it's going to be really hard to narrow down a handful of people that are going to get these award nods at the end of the year, and it's going to be interesting to see if he makes the cut for that. He did a fantastic performance in here that does a lot of heavy lifting in the movie from a story that could be lacking in some areas, but at the same time is still a solid movie overall that, it's probably not going to get award heavy stuff for the overall film, but for his performance, he's got a shot at it. And I think that speaks to his talent and dedication as an actor to putting in the work to really embody Bruce Springsteen in this film, that I think he definitely over-delivered from the rest of the film on that. I think he's a very solid bright light in this film, and he did a fantastic job, in my opinion.
Yes, overall, Springsteen Deliver Me From Nowhere is an okay biopic. It's really carried by a few strong performances between Jeremy Allen White, Jeremy Strong, even going into Odessa Young, who played Faye. They all did a fantastic job in it. It does dive into the notions of depression and everything he was going through, but I don't think we got the weight and emotion behind the songs, that they didn't dive into the meanings and everything else beyond the songs that they could, and that it just needed a little extra. And there's some really just odd with exclusions of his sisters, and for me, for the E Street Band just being kind of set dressings for a lot of this in there. I think it was a decent film overall. I'm probably going to give it a 7, and that's mainly because of how much I like Jeremy Allen White in this.
Yeah, I actually landed exactly on a 7 too for this. Like, it's lacking some of that connectivity that you were really hoping for the music to his mental state. They do a decent enough job of him, like, dealing with the struggles of his childhood and dealing with the depression and things that have plagued him throughout his life, especially in this really dark period of making this album, Nebraska. And it could have connected a little better. It could have been a little tighter about the meaning of not just everything he's dealing with directly, but how it's affecting everyone around him as well. Not a ton around it, like the family element of it. Really just more of him being in this isolated bubble of dealing with his own issues in a time where mental health wasn't strongly discussed and talked about. Which I appreciate them telling that story. The musical moments in this film are solid, and then I love the portrayal of recording in the studio and some of the efforts it takes to make these songs, especially back then, and the complicated nature of taking his bedroom track recordings and transferring them to a media like vinyl, and just the steps that they took for that were a real highlight for me. But solid performance from Jeremy Allen White in particular. Jeremy Strong is really solid in this film too. I give it a solid 7. I was hoping for a little bit more meat. I was hoping for a meatier story in the time that they were given, but they did a fine job with the film overall. It's a solid film, definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, so Springsteen Delivery from Nowhere is in theaters now. Go check it out if you're a fan or not a fan. Like I said, I wasn't a fan going in. I did get a little more respect for him as a human being, as someone who's dealt with depression and everything else myself, and be able to see what he's gone through in his music and everything from that it's one that's worth checking out, but just don't go in with huge expectations because, again, he didn't have the most extraordinary, exciting life, but there are some interesting bits in here. And again, it's worth seeing for Jeremy Allen White and Jeremy Strong having that such great relationship between each other throughout this film that really kind of nailed home the depression and everything else that they were trying to do. It just, the rest of it just needed a little bit more work.
Yeah, hoping for a little more weight behind it, but solid film overall. I'm glad we checked it out. Come to our YouTube comments, come to our Discord, talk about this film. If you checked it out, let us know what you thought about it. We'd love to have the conversation with you.
Yeah, this was one I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to get out of it going in, because as I mentioned, I wasn't a huge Bruce Springsteen fan. Like, I appreciate his hits and stuff, but his voice was one that never really resonated with me very well. But I appreciated what Jeremy Allen White was able to do in the film to kind of bridge that gap between, this is what this song meant and how he sang and why he sang this way and everything else. But it just, if you were going this dark route, I wanted more emotional weight behind a lot of, especially the music. I'm one who really connects with music through its story and through the emotion and stuff behind it. And I think we just got to the edge of it, but we just didn't go fully into where it could have been. And there was also, it made us laugh that Suicide album that he was listening to laying on his floor. That's just like odd, weird, screaming song, and he calls it like one of the greatest albums ever made. And it was that light levity, but also showed that he is in a weird place and stuff with it. But it was like one of the few like kind of funny moments, because you did get some really cute moments between him and the little girl and everything else. It disappointed me that was like not real.
Yeah, you were hoping it was a bigger relationship in his life than what it was, because it made it feel like it was a super important relationship to him in his real life, but come to find out it's just kind of an amalgam of multiple people that he's dating, which is a little bit of a disappointment, but overall still a really solid film. I had fun watching it.
Yeah, and we got Halloween coming up. I know I've been watching some more like Halloween horror. I have actually, even before that Ty West story came out, I hadn't watched the X trilogy yet, so I'm through Pearl. I haven't watched Maxine yet, so I started rewatching those just to see, because after we had that discussion at Horror Hound, when he was talking about everything going in there, that I finally wanted to check it out, so I started checking out this week just to see what the fuss was about. And it was an interesting, odd, weird couple of films, but and knowing the story behind how he got both of them made, because they were just like finished X, and then they're like, well, we're here, and it's like COVID time and everything else. We'll just make another movie while we're here, and reuse the sets, and redress them, and reuse the actors and stuff, and like we'll just make another one while we're here.
Yeah, crazy story. It's definitely interesting to see how those films got made. But yeah, I'm excited to see his take on Christmas Carol. Definitely Robert Eggers as well, but cool to see them both take a stab at it. We'll see.
Yeah, who wins, Johnny Depp or Willem Dafoe is the better Ebenezer Scrooge coming up? Like,
we'll see. That'll be a fun debate to have over the next couple years for sure.
Yeah, just as long as Johnny's doesn't go in that as I mentioned, the Willy Wonka. Like, don't take it Willy Wonka.
You can't not put your mind there, but it's Ty West. You never know. He could try to make it more grounded. We'll see how it goes.
Or he could go wild and crazy over the top, and he's more of a Nicolas Cage and long legs type of Ebenezer Scrooge instead of.
Don't need that. But you never know. We'll see.
So coming up next week, we're going to be checking out the latest dark comedy from Yorgos and Emma Stone in Begonia, which I'll admit it's another week where I haven't been fully in on Yorgos's films like a lot of people have. This is like, I think, the fourth one with him and Emma Stone doing it. But I'm curious to see how this one, because it is a little bit different than the rest. It's a conspiracy about these two guys who think the CEO of a company is an alien coming to like take over the world. So they capture her, and they're trying to figure out like how to prove that she's an alien. It's got an interesting premise, but he has a very odd, weird style, not only to filming, but also to storytelling. So it's going to be interesting to see how this one ends up turning out, because a lot of times they do not turn out like the trailer makes it look like it is.
Yeah, I'm going to have fun debating that one with you next week. This could be another one of those films where you and I are polar opposites in how we view it. I'm excited to see, because I want to see if we're on different wavelengths when it comes to watching this film. So excited to check that one out and talk about it next week.
But that's all we have for you for this week. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one.
To find all of the episodes of We'll Bring the Popcorn, go to our YouTube page, hit the like and subscription button so you're getting our episodes when they drop each and every Monday. If you're listening to us in the audio room on any of the podcasting platforms that we're on, please don't forget to give us a 5-star review. It really helps elevate the profile of the show. And don't forget to go to willbringthepopcorn.com, where it has all of our archive videos, all of our social media information, as well as our merch store, so you continue to support the show in that way. We cannot thank you enough for your continued support.